Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 295, and today's date is February 20th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Ukraine Conflict Ignites Tension Between the U.S. and Russia. And we're seeing what's going on in the Ukraine. We can see that it is completely out of control. Yesterday I reported that there was a temporary truce, and that no longer exists because the central bankers, U.S. government, they do not want a truce. They do not want peace. They want the Ukrainian government out of power, and they want their puppet government in there so they can put in a private Western central bank and have Ukraine join NATO because they need this strategic location. They need another country on the debt system, and this is why we are seeing all these riots. This is why all other countries around the world that are not part of the private Western central banks are looking at this and saying this whole thing is being provoked by the EU, the United States, and all the private Western central bank countries, because this only came about when they decided, the Ukraine decided not to go with the Eurozone, and they looked around and said, listen, all these countries are in debt. They have high unemployment between 12% all the way up to 35%, and things are not getting better. And most of the countries are implementing austerity, and the people cannot survive. And then they looked over in Russia and China and other nations and said, okay, let's see what else is out there. Russia, things are thriving there. Things are going very well. And they looked and they said, you know what, maybe we should go with Russia at this time. And this is what they decided to do. As soon as they made that decision, all of a sudden, the people of the country broke out saying, no, we want the EU, we want the EU. And if you really look at the tapes and you look at what's going on, the protesters, the rioters are all throwing bombs. They are all shooting weapons, and if you really take a look past what the corporate media is reporting, and they are really playing this up, and of course they always play up the side that has where the country is not run by a puppet government by the United States. So we're looking at the Ukraine, they're really playing this up, but we didn't see them really play it up in Libya, in Lebanon, when the people of those countries are fighting against the puppet government. You don't see that happening, but you do see this here in the Ukraine, because this is where they want all eyes focused. They want everyone looking at this, showing that the people want democracy. And when you really look at this, the government has really been holding back. They have not implemented many of the things they could have implemented, and they're looking for a peaceful way to dissolve this situation and to remedy the situation. And so far, the opposition will not work with the government. Every time something happens, it always breaks out into more fighting. And if you really look at Syria, the same thing happens. They pay the paid mercenaries to fight against the Syrian government, Assad, in the same exact way. And every time they're talking about peace, they do not want peace. They even had the Geneva II talks, and the only thing on the agenda was to remove Assad. That was it. There was no other talk. That was the talk of Geneva II. That was the entire thing, and it completely fell apart. The same thing's happening in the Ukraine. But what's happening is that Russia is on one side, just like in Syria, and the United States, the EU, and other private Western central banks are on the other side. And this could really turn nasty if things continually progress. Let's get into the economic collapse news. We're going to head out to France, and of course the president of France has been saying that, they're recovering, they're coming out of this recession, things are looking great. Well, again, we realize that this is a complete lie. And of course, every single time a government official comes out there and tells you that things are getting better, it is always the opposite, because, again, the government officials do not have to tell you. They don't have to prove it to you. The people of the country would feel it. They would see more jobs. They would see more income. They would see more businesses expanding. They would see with their own eyes and they would feel it. And you know what it feels like when things are going well. When things are not going well, you know what that feels like. You know what that feels like. And if a government official or the EU or the central bankers need to force this upon you and tell you that things are getting better, you know they are not. And what we're seeing in France right now is the service sector shrank the most in 9 months in February. The market chief economist Chris Williamson, we'd hoped late last year that with GDP growth in the fourth quarter we might see a return to growth in the PMIs, but that has not materialized. Markets index for the service sector fell to 46.9 from 48.9 in January, a 9-month low that was well under economists' average expectations for an increase to 49.4. In the manufacturing sector, the index fell to 48.5 from 49.3 in January. So things are just not getting better there. They're not getting better in France. They're not getting better in Spain, in Italy, in Portugal, in Greece, in Cyprus, in the UK, in Germany. The EU is in a recession/depression. Just think about it. During the Great Depression, unemployment in the United States was 25%. If we look across the ocean and we look at the European nation, the entire thing is at 12.2% right now. Some nations are 25%. Other nations are 30%. It is not getting better. If we look at the youth unemployment, we're seeing nations that have at least 62% unemployment that have to do with the youth of the country, and that is the driving force. These are the people that start families. These are the people that buy houses. These are the people that go out and spend their disposable income. And if they don't have work, and if 62%, 40% do not have work, these economies will not grow. They will shrink, and this is what we are seeing. Now, because we understand that the European nations are doing poorly, the European consumer confidence plunges, and it has completely fallen, and we can see why this has happened. It seems that a record unemployment, record suicide rates, record bad loans, record low credit creation made, and every single person in the Eurozone is feeling that things are completely falling apart. And this led to the biggest drop in confidence in 18 months and the biggest miss since August 11th. And we know why. Because things are not getting better. Now, here in the United States, Walmart just reported that they had a 21% fall in profits in the fourth quarter. And of course, they're blaming this on the government because they reduced food stamps. Now, is Walmart's entire model based on government subsidies like food stamps? Because that kind of scares me, that this is what they were depending on to keep profits up. And again, people are not buying other things like TVs, clothing. They are keeping their money. They are only paying for rent. They're paying for fuel. They're paying for food, whatever they're cutting down on what they purchase and the type of food they purchase. So you can see what is happening. More people are buying in bulk to make ends meet, and this is why we see things not going well. And we're seeing it all across retail. This is why as soon as the holiday season was over, Macy's, JCPenney, Sears all told the corporate news that they were closing stores, laying off people, and then a lot of the smaller chains came out and said, yes, we need to start closing stores, laying off people. And again, the Christmas season was terrible. The American people used up their credit card, and then after that they went into their savings just to buy the few gifts that they could purchase during this time. But it wasn't even enough to bring in the retail sales to a positive level. It was actually a decline in the number of sales. And again, coming up this year, it's going to be even worse if we make it to the end of the year. Now, I remember this must have been about 2-3 weeks ago when I reported on Caterpillar, and they were the stock market was going up, saying, "Oh my God, Caterpillar is doing much better." And again, I reported that they closed many plants, they laid off like 20,000 something people, and again, Caterpillar is not doing well. The company, the global 3-month rolling retail sales declined by 8% in the month of January, which was the 14th consecutive drop. This is the longest string of contracting sales since Lehman crisis and the last recession. So you can see these are indicators that we are heading down a very dark path at this time. Now, the Philly Fed just reported, and again, they completely missed. It was printed at a negative 6.3. They expected a plus 8.0, and this does not look good. New orders and shipments collapsed, inventory surged, channel stuffing by auto manufacturers, employment plunged, and the average work week dropped notably. So things are not going well, and what we're seeing here is that in February, prices paid fell to 14.2 versus 18.7 the prior month. New orders fell to negative 5.2 versus 5.1 from the prior month. Employment fell to 4.8 versus 10.0 from the prior month. And inventories rose to 3.6 versus negative 2.0 from the prior month. So we can see what is going on here. Things are not going well in the economy, and these are all indicators showing that we are headed down a very, very dark path. Now, I talk about real estate quite a bit, and I believe that I know real estate is crashing right now. It is mortgage applications are plunging, new home sales are plunging, sales are plunging in general, new home builder confidence is plunging, and of course everyone was looking at the rental market saying, well, people aren't buying homes, but at least the rental market is doing well, and we had all the hedge funds and the investment companies all in there buying homes, trying to raise the prices, and they figured, oh, you know what we'll do? We'll just rent them while we hold on to these homes, and we can show that, sales across America are picking up again, prices are starting to rise, we'll rent these out, but the rental industry is starting to fall apart. What we're seeing right now, rents collected on the collateral, the first U.S. rental home security declined by 7.6% from October to January, and this is according to Morningstar. Payments declined as expiring leases and early tenant departures left residents backing the bonds of Blackstone Group. And 8.3% of the properties were vacant or occupied by delinquent renters in January. Renewals on 78.5% of leases that expired the prior month exceeded the analyst's expected rate of 66.7%. So even the rental market is not doing well. People can't pay rent. People can't buy new homes. The entire system is imploding all around us, and we can see it happening right in front of our faces. It's a little bit each day, but each day shows us another indicator that things are not going well. Now, we understand that the government, their whole mission is to disarm the American people, because they understand when this collapse comes, they cannot have people with weapons. And they're trying to they're using every tactic in the book to disarm the American people. They don't care how they do it. They just don't want people to have weapons. And again, we have to remember the UN Arms Treaty, the Dianne Feinstein gun bill are still pending in the Senate, and they only keep them pending there and for a specific reason. And that is going to be for some type of an event to occur that will help push these bills through and passed and headed toward the president's desk, where he has all the executive orders all written out to support these bills. But a U.S. senator intends to introduce a bill called the Handgun Trigger Safety Act into Congress that will require all handgun manufacturers sold in or imported into the United States to incorporate a personalized handgun, which is called the Smart Gun technology, within 3 years following the passage of this bill. And what they want is every single handgun to identify who is holding the weapon and will allow you to fire the weapon. If it is not being held by a person, the weapon will not fire. And what's happening is the National Shooting Sports Foundation took a survey, and they asked the people, what do you think about the smart gun? And they're saying that they would not purchase one of these type of weapons, and because they were an unproven technology and unreliable. And but again, the government doesn't care about that. They rather implement and pass this bill and have people not purchase the weapons at all, because that is their main plan. They want the American people to have no weapons whatsoever, because when the economic collapse happens, it will be much easier for the anti-terrorism, DHS organization, military organization, to come down on the American people, collect those who are on their list who pose a threat to the government, and there will be no one fighting back at this time. And this is the way they believe it will be much easier to keep the American people controlled in a situation like this. Now, yesterday in my report, I reported on DHS. They were looking at license plate collection system that would scan everyone's license plates, put it into a federal database, and they'd be able to track you. Well, I guess there was some type of backlash because they canceled the orders for these devices because of all the privacy groups saying, no, you can't do this. I said to yesterday that Judge Napolitano was out there saying this is completely unconstitutional, and now they have backed off temporarily. Again, they will revisit the situation because they understand they need to track every single person, and what's going to happen is they'll try a different way of getting these purchased, and we will see that, because again, the goal is always the same. The tactic they use might change a little bit. So what's happening now is that the Seattle police from DHS, who funds all the local police because they want them all in compliance with DHS, and they'll give them technologies, they'll give them tanks, they'll give them weapons as long as they stay in compliance with the DHS, and take orders from the DHS because they need all local law enforcement to cooperate, because this increases the DHS forces when the economic collapse comes. But the Seattle police, they're preparing for facial recognition programs into their system. And next month, the software will reportedly be used to scan and compare surveillance video to the city's mugshot database. When asked if the federal government would be given access to information collected, the Seattle City Council member Bruce Harrell argued that the city would need to share its data to protect the country from potential terrorists. Well, this is because they're in compliance with DHS, and they're going to share every single piece of information. And again, they're pushing this, and there's going to be facial recognition all over the place. Once Seattle's set up, you'll see DHS with their funded grants go to every single city, and all the cities will have cameras, facial recognition to track every single one of us. And now DHS wants to put facial recognitions for border surveillance to see who's coming and going through the border, and they want to keep a record with who's trying to get in and out of the country. The country will be locked down. Everyone will be tracked. They will know where you are. There will be checkpoints. Again, I discussed this yesterday with the Real IDs. There'll be RFID chips inserted into your license. And you have to remember, your license you pretty much carry wherever you are, and this is why they want to put the RFID chip in there. This way they can track you wherever you are, because really, you put your license into your wallet, you usually carry a wallet, and this way they always know where you are. And again, this is just the next level of tracking, and they just need to keep an eye on every single person, because they will declare martial law. Once martial law is declared, they will need to know where everyone is. Now, DHS, as we know, has been purchasing millions upon millions of rounds of ammunition. And the Department of Homeland Security is contracted to purchase 704 million rounds of ammunition over the next 4 years, which is equal to a total number of 2,500 rounds per DHS agent. Why do they need so much ammo? Well, we know it's not for the terrorists. They need it for the domestic terrorists, and that is the American people. But we also have to remember, as of October 2013, DHS had a total amount of 159 million ammunition rounds on hand in inventory, which comes out to be about 2,270 rounds per agent. And now they want another 704 million rounds, which would give them 2,500 rounds per DHS agent, added to the 2,271 rounds. So that is a lot of rounds of ammo. So they're expecting a full-out war with the American people. Okay, now we understand that things are heating up in the Middle East, in the Ukraine, in Venezuela, in Thailand, in Tunisia, in Africa, and we understand that the American military use drones to ward off those terrorists, the people who are fighting back, trying to take back their countries. And right now, the White House, because things are really heating up and they don't want this information out there, the White House Press Secretary John Carney told reporters Thursday that the Obama administration will not be releasing any more information about the use of drones to kill American citizens. Now, why is that? Why don't they want to let us know what's actually going on around the world with drones and if they've killed Americans? Because they're going to start beefing up the drone attacks because things are getting out of hand. Right now in Libya, what's happening there is if you like to call them Al-Qaeda, or the people who are fighting back against the central bankers, U.S. government. They've given the government an ultimatum. And the ultimatum is, remove yourself from government, we are taking over. And if this actually goes forward and happens, and they scrap the central bank and they start selling the oil, not using the U.S. dollar, we will have a domino effect across the world with the U.S. dollar, because I've explained this before. When these countries are not selling oil using the U.S. dollar, countries do not have to hold the U.S. dollar. If they don't have to hold the U.S. dollar because they can pay for the oil in other currencies, that U.S. dollar is now returned to the United States. If they don't have to hold anything with the United States, they don't have to hold the Treasury bonds. So guess what? Those Treasury bonds head back to the United States. And if there's a seller, there has to be a buyer. Maybe that's why they want everyone in their retirement to have the MyRA. And this way, because they understand that someone has to buy all these treasuries that are being sold, and we already understand that China is now dumping the treasuries, and they understand once a flood of these treasuries come in, somebody has to purchase them, and I guess it'll be very easy just to put them in everyone's retirement account. Now we understand that the United States empire, the central bankers, have spread themselves all across the world. Ukraine, Middle East, Thailand, Tunisia, Africa, and Venezuela. And in Venezuela, what's happening is that they are starting the riots. They're starting the destabilization from within. And they're putting people into place. The riots are everything's starting to get going because they want to replace the government of Venezuela. Again, they have a lot of oil reserves. They like to put that on the U.S. dollar. Again, they are spreading the dollar, the private central banking model all across the world. This is the end game, and this is how they're handling it. Now, we understand that the Ukraine, there was a truce, and of course the truce was broken, and the people are rising up in there because they're being pushed by the U.S., the EU, and many other countries that have to do with the private Western Central Bank, because they want the Ukraine. They want it, and they want it bad. And right now, the President Obama said Wednesday, it is worth noting Russia's role in the violent civil unrest in both Ukraine and Syria. Those are the two places where the central bankers in the United States really want to get into. They like to get into Syria, but Russia blocked them. They like to get into Ukraine. They wanted them to join the EU, but Russia blocked them. So we can see what's happening now. It's a huge conflict. It's tension between Russia and the United States. And he went on to say, I don't think it is worth noting that you have in this situation in one country that has been a client state of Russia and another whose government is currently being supported by Russia, whose people obviously have a different view and vision for that country, the president said, of Ukraine and Syria. So what's happening is the people in the Ukraine controlled by the United States, and I wonder how many of them are actually Ukrainian, and they are using every method possible. They don't want peace. They don't want to talk about peace. They want to replace the government. They want that government out, and they want the U.S. government and the EU to put in a puppet government. They've been using weapons. They've been using Molotov cocktails. They've been using everything in their power. The Ukraine government has been holding back from declaring martial law, from coming down on them, and they've been saying, listen, we want a ceasefire, we want to have peace, can we just discuss this? And every time this happens, the opposition goes back to what they are doing, and that is creating havoc in the country. Now, during this time, we understand that the Eurozone has been implementing sanctions, and this is what always happens. Sanctions come in, the rioting happens. The same thing happened in Iran, in Syria. It's happening in Venezuela. It happened throughout the Middle East. And again, it all follows the same exact path. And of course, after sanctions, there'll be some type of military intervention, or they'll go to the UN to get a resolution to go into the country to try to replace the government, trying to use all different tactics to get in there. But right now, Canada has imposed sanctions on the Ukraine government. The EU has been doing the same thing. The United States is also doing the same thing. And of course, the U.S. President and Chancellor Merkel, which is pretty much the head of the EU, they're saying that we need to stay in close contact with all of this that's happening. And again, we have to understand, why is the EU and the United States, the private Western central bankers, even involved in the Ukraine? If they're having a problem internally, let them handle it. The same thing with Syria, the same thing with Venezuela. Why is the United States always involved? These are sovereign nations. They can handle their own internal disputes. The reason why is because they're the ones who are creating this. The United States, I'm talking about the central bankers, they're the ones who have an agenda, and that's why you see this happening. Now, during this whole entire time, Russia is going to strengthen the Mediterranean force with stealth subs. The combat capability of Russia's naval task force in the Mediterranean will increase significantly following the first deliveries of the stealth submarines to the Black Sea. Russia formed a permanent naval task force in the Mediterranean last year to defend its interest in the region. The task force currently consists of 12 warships, auxiliary vessels, including the nuclear-powered missile cruiser. The tasks assigned to the Mediterranean group are absolutely clear: to thwart any threat to Russia's borders and security. So again, I've been saying this a lot. All these nations understand the plan of the central bankers. They've been moving their military assets in preparation for World War III. And they understand eventually World War III will come about. It might happen from the Ukraine incident. It might happen in Venezuela. It might happen with China and Japan. It could even happen with Syria and Iran. Wherever the spark, wherever it ignites, we will see all nations get involved. Now, in Syria, we understand that the fighting is not going well for the rebels. They're having problems. We understand that Washington with the Arab nations are all having secret meetings for some type of plan they're putting together. And again, back in January 13th, and I think I actually reported on this, they said there was another chemical attack by Assad, and of course this was when all the chemical weapons were being removed and broken down, and they were being guarded. And again, the allegations of new chemical attack in Syria have gained little attention in Washington. The rebels brought it up. They demand a UN inquiry, but again, Washington's not listening to this because that whole entire plan is completely gone. No one's listening anymore. This just happened this year, January 13th of 2014. Again, because they realize that The American people do not care about what happens inside Syria if there is a chemical attack, if people die. This is the Syrian government's business. What they will care about if something happens here on U.S. soil. Now, again, prior to that, we might see something else happen because we don't know exactly what their plans are. We know what the White House is planning. We understand that they're planning with other nations. We might see some type of night raid. We might see an assassination. We might see anything out of the ordinary happen inside of Syria. And if that doesn't go well, we will definitely see a false flag event. And of course, they're going to try to use the UN. They're going to try to get the resolutions passed, and they're going to try everything in the book to try to make this happen. And when it all fails and breaks down, they will be pushed against the wall. They'll have no alternative but to use a false flag event. And you have to remember, all of this has been planned. Everything is in place, and all they have to do is give a green light, and this will happen. Okay, now we understand there's been a lot of cyber attacks happening. I mean, a lot of them from the Syrian Electronic Army. We had a report from Iran, they were hitting, and other attacks where they just don't know where it's coming from. Of course, they report it's China and North Korea. But now we see that in the University of Maryland, 309,000 students, all their information was hacked into by a sophisticated cyber attack. They can't really track it down at this point, but it's just not a casual hacker. It has to be state-sponsored, and this is what they're believing, because what they're seeing is they've been seeing financial attacks, they've been seeing retail attacks, and now we're seeing attacks on colleges and universities. We've been seeing attacks on the power grid, and we're seeing this all over the place. And again, this is all in preparation for the next false flag event, because they're trying to keep this fresh in the American people's minds that there will be a cyber attack, that there will be attacks on the power grid. And speaking of the power grid, it comes to the attention that we understand that there was an attack in California. It looks like it was very strategic and planned out. And Naval SEALs have come forward and said, listen, if we were going to attack the power grid, this is exactly how we would do it. So you can tell this was a dry run of professionals planning an attack on the power grids. And again, I've said this in the past, I do believe that when this false flag event hits, and of course I said this yesterday, something big has to happen to the economy for the Fed to stop the taper and to start printing again. And really, something big means it has to damage the economy. Well, what can damage the economy? A direct cyber attack to the financial institutions, a direct attack to the New York Stock Exchange, which has a kill switch, a direct attack to NASDAQ, which has a kill switch, a direct attack to the BAT system, which has a kill switch. They are prepared and ready. They are ready for what is coming because they understand the economy is collapsing. Now, Americans are angrier and frustrated and pissed off about the economy and what is going on in this country. And here's some statistics. 65% of Americans are dissatisfied with the U.S. system of government and its effectiveness. 66% of Americans are dissatisfied with the size and power of the federal government. 70% of Americans do not have confidence that the government will make progress on the important problems and issues facing the country in 2014. 60% of Americans report feeling angry and irritable. 53% of Americans believe that Obama administration is not competent in running the government. 60% of Americans report feeling I said that one already. 60% of Americans believe that the economic system in this country unfairly favors the wealthy. 73% of Americans believe that Obama's efforts to reform the NSA won't make much difference in protecting people's privacy. 77% of Americans believe that the state of the economy is either not good or headed for a collapse. So People understand what is going on. People are starting to feel it because when the economy and things are not going well. You feel it, you see it. Even though the corporate media is trying to convince everyone, yes, on the surface you say, well, they're telling me it's good, so it has to be. But inside, somewhere deep down, you really know that something just isn't right. And we are going to see all these angry Americans become even angrier when the collapse comes because guess what? They are not prepared for what is coming. They really don't understand what is coming. And this is why I've been telling people to prepare, because you want to make sure that your family is safe. You want to make sure you can survive. You want to make sure you can help others if you can. You want to make sure that you help the people in your family that are sick, that they have the proper medication, they have the proper oxygen tanks, they have the proper water. You want to make sure you have cash on hand. You want to make sure you have gold and silver if you can purchase it at this time. You want to make sure that you have a weapon to protect your family, because when this hits, the other people are going to become desperate because they don't understand what is happening. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.